All right. I started to think about it, and I'm like, oh yes, I have to kind of show some of my stripes in a way. Um, okay, so there's this absolutely loathsome, loathsomely dishonest part of the debate now in public, as if critical race theory or that type of Marxist school of teaching does not exist. And now it's just kind of this part of like, oh nigga, shut the fuck up. Like where you just want to slap niggas. And so it's just one of these moments where it hit me finally where I'm like, but the worst problem about these fucking punk ass marks is what they're teaching is about the only thing they know, the master's whip. And that's like the part about it that to me is the funniest. Like when I really think about like in hood servitive, like I just said that, but nobody knows what I mean by it. So I thought about those words. I'm like, yeah, that actually is a really pretty good double entendre. CRT teachers are teaching about the only part of black history they know, the master's whip. And they were usually holding it because they're Democrats. So they're not teaching about the explosion of soul music or the explosion of jazz music across the world as like a form of music that united, was the music of modernism, the spread of market economics, the wearing of suits by men, the stabilization of families, literate middle class, having a car, like in a jungle country. Like, that was the music of those people. They don't want to talk about that. No. They want to talk about the master's whip, because that's the part they remember who had scratched their neck about. Scratch their neck. That's when, for the people who aren't black who see this, scratch your neck is, it's a little antiquated of a term, but you get it pretty much immediately. Most Americans, I think, get the idea. It's even a gesture done, apparently, people will do it in Japan to indicate the discomfort of the moment, so that you will then get that body signal, this overt body signal, and then you will ease up. It's kind of to me, it's one of the more fascinating things about humans. But that was the first thing I was thinking about. And so people say, but there's all these people who are saying that it doesn't exist and yada yada yada, and they're like black or Hispanic or HispaniX with an X at the end. Spanx. That's the one that they should do. Some homie should come out with HispaniX with it, just instead of a CS at the end, just an X, and like and like something funny as fuck, like, because you see, like Hispanic people are just as funny about Hispanic people as they crack mean ass jokes about themselves. And a lot of times these jokes are also absolutely brilliant. Sometimes they go a little over the top, but sometimes they're fucking brilliant. Like, there was somebody who put me on to one guy, and he came up, it was Cholo Fit, if I remember, with your homie Creeper. That's what it was. I think that's what it was called. It was a funny bit. Homie was funny as fuck, and it was a funny bit. And he tried to, like, take the character to where he could take the character, but I mean, and there's only so long any bit can go on, really. You got to be extraordinary to make a bit go on for years, but it was a good bit. It was a good gag. And Cholo Fit, and he had like the homie squat, and where he gets out of fitness, but like one of the key forms, what was it? He was pointing out one of the key forms in Cholo Fit is to ride your bicycle around the neighborhood and stuff. It was really funny. It was a funny gag. And so stuff like that, that's the real thing. That's the real culture. The real culture can laugh at itself. It can point out how kind of goofy it in itself is, and that's also, it's one of its unique and fine points that makes a culture. You have to be able to joke about yourself or it's not real. If people who can't joke about themselves aren't legit. That's one of the most important things I found out in life, and it always applies, always, everywhere, at all times. Doesn't matter who. They can't laugh at themselves. There's something fucking wrong with them. And yeah, they're too serious, or it's that they are also so good at being the zinger in the room that they could take like what looks like all the jokes toward them, but they're really actually setting it up so that they could come back with a really good zinger. And that's, and that's a skill. That's like, people like that are pretty unique. They're extraordinarily smart. That's the thing. But anyway, so there was that part about critical race theory, because I've thought about this. You don't hear any of these critical race theory people bringing up where a lot of this stuff even started with the Marxists, and also then a milieu of sort of racial fraternities, sororities, and then really legitimately secret societies like Noble Drew Ali's kind of end of black nationalism, and what ends up evolving into things like the Nation of Islam and such like. The Crescent and the Compass actually is a really good book that has sort of the involvement of Islam and Freemasonry and early kind of black identity movements and such. And it was the rage of the day. That's a thing I think a lot of people don't. I think there's a lot of men now that when they think about this, they're like, this is so weird. Like, why were people into that? That's when we had old-time religion, and it's like, no, this was the rage of the day. If you were interested, if you were a nerd, you would have been interested in a lot of the stuff Freemasonry was talking about, because a lot of the books that publishing houses associated with like Freemasons, and even they themselves, they've been doing the translating, like Aleister Crowley, if I remember right, translated the Tao Te Ching. I did not know he could do that, but he supposedly translated a version of it. And supposedly, I mean, that was the thing, is this wasn't when he was young, he was quite brilliant in the realm of consuming and analyzing occult texts and mythology and philosophy. And, and it's just been a sort of a cycle of a popular end of interests among men of the West, is that over about the last decade, in most of the Eurosphere, there was a generation of young men who took to an intense interest in knowing about where did all this occult stuff come from, what is the history of Europe, and who are Europeans, therefore, by some form of identity. And that's changed everything about politics across the European world. And I think a big part of why so many parties are going all in on this lockdown is because they're starting to see it in numbers. They're starting to look at when they talk to Google, and Google's talking about extremism and this, that, and the other, and they say, okay, so give us an idea. How many people are looking up these things that you say indicate extremism? Well, all these people are looking all this stuff up about the Crusaders through the medieval historic period of Europe. And this would be, and it's probably just some number that makes people start unloading in their fucking pants right there in the meeting. When they start to realize that, like, tremendous numbers of white men are actually interested in subjects that are worthy of studying, such as, the history of medieval Europe, which shaped the modern world. You might want to know something about that. Being that it's right there on YouTube for free at all times. You could play a video game, you could wank, or you could learn why things are the way they are. Well, and that's of course associated with extremism now. It's not considered being literate. You see, if a black person were studying medieval European history because they wanted to know why things are the way they are, somebody would get up on a fucking chair and clap for them. I love talking about, like, how comparing the medieval European period to then say something in China with liberals, because holy crap, I mean, they practically do double monkey backflips, and it's like, oh my gosh, you're tan and you know about this, and it's just like, everyone should be knowing about this. This isn't abnormal knowledge. It happened. So anyway, so I'm thinking that especially a place like Australia, they're probably detecting, when they look across the internet, there's a whole lot of people who are like, all these people are full of shit. And so finally they get this reason to absolutely lock them down with force and coercion. And the beautiful part is a huge portion of the population has embraced the nihilism that is fundamentally a part of this. And this hopeless nihilism that has become so very typical of this era of time, the kind of the doomer. And because it was funny, because there was this one kid, he would talk about how he would love for some kind of cyberpunk future, and he would joke around and this and that. But he's one of these people who, it's like, he would be in the bad way of, he was a dude with legs so big he could probably jump over himself. And one of the things is he doesn't get, when times get rough, men like him get picked out of crowds, and people like look for money from him because he has like just enough of that look that like, yeah, he's the kind of guy who, it's like, you don't get, you're a little extraordinary, so somebody is going to try to dominate you, and it's going to be a low life. At some point you're going to have to accept that low lives are the people who usually do that 90% of the time, and the people doing it at an elite level are doing it mostly because people are practically begging them to do it to them. But he wasn't there yet. He couldn't give up on idealism. And I remember he even remembered that. There was something he and I once said, there's something that went back and forth, and I had once said that about it to him, and he thought, and he repeated it in a way that it was kind of funny. He repeated it. He said, I know, yeah, because you must understand that the ideals don't matter. It's the interests involved in the situation. And it was like, or something. He repeated it back, and I was like, oh, that stuck. All right, you might live, like you might live to be an old man with wisdom and gray hair. All right, So the other thing I was considering over the last, like, about 48 hours by looking at the world around me is, okay, there's a piece in a type of pump for soaps that's an automatic soap pump It is a type of oblong cog. It's a plastic cog, and it's on a little electric motor. So whenever you have an automatic dispenser of soap, this thing typically allows for the two types of liquids to mix together as it goes long. Once it goes wide, it then closes off the channels of the liquid, so the automatic soap dispenser then stops. What do you do when you can't get that cog? Or that cog is sitting on the sea someplace, so your automatic soap dispenser doesn't work. You bought the automatic soap dispenser because the automatic soap dispenser is a part of a company-wide effort to save electricity by doing the right thing to save the goddamn trees. So, because you see, people can't use soap any other way outside of a very large automatic robotic soap dispenser. But now you don't have the cog. So now you've got the big soap dispenser sitting there, and what's next to it? A little squeeze bottle of soap right off the shelf. So, what? There's more of this than I've been. There's so many of these that I'm like, the roof tile, the one roof tile. You know, you're short of getting a whole roof replaced, except for pretty much one roof tile, because you're able to put together some other roof tiles. So you need one roof tile though. And the problem though is once you get that roof tile, hopefully it hasn't rained so much that it hasn't permanently damaged the internal ceiling. This is what is now starting to happen with the supply chain. All these little tiny bits and pieces things. The small water pump that is specifically because it probably does something where it locks off, or it could pull stuff back in, or it's the water dispenser that's specifically not for steaming in an oven, so that when it automatically cleans the oven, you need this pump to work. And this pump is in the mail for a very long time. And so it's things like this that now I'm like, this is the supply chain issue. It's the third, fourth degree, that third and fourth degree thing from economics of it affects this down the line, it affects that down the line, it affects that down the line. And then this becomes something that people like thousands and thousands and thousands of people see or need or use like constantly. Because and I'm just like, shit, dude. I'm starting to see little bits and pieces of it. Just here and there. Just this little piece, this little pump, this little item. There's some things that I'm not seeing it being too hard to get. There's some food items still that the costs that they were before, oddly enough, when bought in bulk, not that much more. And I really mean that. Like maple syrup, when bought at bulk, is actually still it's higher. It's not such a high price that it's kind of unbelievable. There's a number of things bought in bulk that what they've gone up in price is actually it's doable. If I had to buy it in smaller units, that would be harder. So this was just something I started rolling over these things in my mind, like these various things I'm seeing happen, kind of trying to document them, you know, the way that I like to do on this channel with, you know, professionalism and expert editing, you know, and lots of jump cuts. You know, there's nothing as good as a jump cut. I'm still sitting back like, this is really something I'm very much lamenting now. I mean, I'm really sitting back like, dude, there are to know that there's now sort of this thing of like that men are just like fuck it, but to know like that it's just so unabashed, the contempt that so many women have for men in our society, and how that's become like a fashion. And I really feel like it's at that point where, I mean, I kind of look at the young guys and I'm like, I mean, I guess live for what makes you happy, but dang, you know, there's so much, man, we had it good. We had it good. That's weird. Every once in a while I'm like, I mean, of course we did, but I mean, we had it really good. There was still unconquered wilderness, like in your backyard, pretty much. You could go out with your BMX bikes all day, you know, and it just, holy crap, dude. I mean, like, and you would really think that in some way, shape, or form, there would be some group. Well, no, you're seeing it. You're seeing the parents revolt. There we go. I had to roll that over in my mind. That's really what it is. The parents hate this. The parents know that the kids aren't sick. The parents understand, because the parents have to deal with practicalities every day. And really a big thing that we're seeing is a bunch of these old biddies and these childless women, and kind of nut job women ruling society, and that there's all these parents, like fully formed families that are like, okay, I've seen a lot of sicknesses, you know, like I've seen the real ones. I'm sorry, this one is not that tough, and this one isn't even giving the kids a fever. Shut the fuck up, you hoes. So shut up, you old hoes. But yeah, that's that is a big part of what. There's a lot of women who need to embrace this idea that there's a huge portion of women in our society that are the real thing witches. They want to beguile you and ruin your life. Like, women need to get this. They need to, like, understand, like, no, you all don't want some kind of holy spirit. As the cool breeze, as the Chinese call the Holy Spirit, and the cool breeze, the one Holy Spirit, as is put in the various Chinese manuscripts on Christianity. With really, I thought that was very interesting, that aspect of their theology, that as a definitive term, they really made sure that definitive term was used so that they were understood correctly. That there's many spirits. There is the one Holy Spirit. And that was the big deal, is that no, there's many spirits, and some of them might be beneficial, but there's only one that is the idea of set aside. And so rather than kind of, you know, getting into this idea of being kind of upright and modest and all these things, it's like, oh, I bet you men would like that. I bet you men would like that if we just were modest and demure. And then there's all these things where all these women then break into, especially when they talk to Kevin Samuels, they break in, and on TikTok too, like the 1950s wife was this mouth shut, didn't speak or something, like, and you're just kind of like, what do you all know about the 1950s? Like what do you all seem to know about the 1930s through the 60s? Because this wasn't a period of time where women were being grossly oppressed in America. I mean, like, this is the explosion of fashion. Like this is literally the period of time that I mean, almost all of women's high fashion is still based loosely on that period of time. on the mod period, the modernist period. This is when all the goddess stuff enters literature, in at the low levels of literature. You have many more women in college than, I mean, because remember in the 20s there were a bunch of women who went to college. Then after World War I, they didn't go into college as much, and then after World War II they actually also didn't go into college as much, and it was simply because it was more lucrative to marry a man who had gone to college, who had a good job. It made more sense. And it really, there's a lot of people who think, oh, that's some like kind of capitulation to the market economics of household economics. And it's like, oh yeah, that would be capitulation to reality. Yes. That would be wanting to be happy by doing what works best. Yes, that would be the horrors of being a demure housewife in the 1950s, having more than enough by the time you're in your 50s, you know, and so by the time you're both old, you can enjoy yourselves quite a bit, you know, oh darn, you know, oh no, Red Foreman, oh his obviously not yappy wife, you know, and that, yeah, oh, that's what men did. All men were like that back then. Yeah, your grandpa, he used to beat the crap out of everything he saw. He was kicking the dog, slapping the hose. He was smacking everyone on the ass. It's all men did. That's because that's what makes the world function correctly too. Because you see, no men have problems with you doing something like that. There's not laws. There's never been laws against that. No, not until like 1989. something along those lines. You know, some fantasy world along those lines. And so I was. Yeah, so I've been just now really just rolling over this thing of like, there's really going to be this super huge number of women left out there who are just totally miserable. And I was listening to the captain talking about marriage and how he's like, no, have a girlfriend, have her live nearby, and you guys could just have fun. And that he really, when it comes to the raw numbers, and I do recommend, there's two things I recommend this. Men who, anyone who sees this, that you're totally legitimately interested in marriage, the Book of Numbers by Aaron Clary, or if you are kind of a theological man who wants to battle the red pillars and the men who are like, no, don't marry these hoes, the Book of Numbers by Aaron Clary, because it really has shown to me some of the numbers I'm hearing get quoted because I just keep finding stuff like that's quoted by him, and so, or people quoting him, or him quoting himself, or other stats that come from what would probably be that bank of information, like especially stuff from the dating apps, and the way that it's looking. It's just one of these things of like, this is not an interest that women really care about. It's not something that they genuinely seem to really, it's not important until they don't have a choice. It is meant to be pop the shoot. I need to find somebody who I could get along with well enough for the rest of my life that I don't starve. Just like Refolt was kind of putting, that it comes down to, can she work? And so it's just one of those things which then, being that that's who you prefer, that in all these societies before really, soap, if that was the deal, that you married a woman who was rather hefty and good for work, and really specifically just not good looking. Like you married her because she could get the work done around the house. Then what did that say about the kind of the women who then you chose to have kids with in those types of societies? Was just not living through childbirth so normal that it was just always understood there were these leftovers who would then get married for labor purposes. Which, I mean, like, in a way, there's a part of it that, in a way, I'm like, well, that is kind of, I mean, that is a way of solving a social problem rather mercifully, that people stay in the society and useful. But then there's this part of me that's like, and that's also very, very tragic. That's like, when you think about it that way. But it's that kind of thing of, and if you take any human situation, you add utter and complete tragedy and black pill the fuck out of it, you usually have something close to the way things really are. So that was another part of why I kind of went there. So this is running long. Had my walksies and got my talksies and had my coffee. And so I'll talk to you all soon.